Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is same story, different generations, barriers to students in higher education, a panel discussion with some members of our community, uh, moderated by Rachel DeLauder. While we're waiting for everybody's microphones to kick in, just give you a quick plug on a couple of upcoming Tuesday topics. This is the last Tuesday topic of this quarter. Our next topic will be new week 1, week 2 in winter quarter, which is Tuesday, January the 12th. We've got Understanding and Respecting Gender, a guide for faculty and professional staff. And then the week after that, we have CNHP PhD programs, Homecoming, Postdoctoral Pathways, followed by Meet the CNHP Board of Global Healthcare Engagement. All these available on our Tuesday Topics website. And we've got a few more that are coming out in the next couple of weeks. All right. So let me throw it over to Rachel DeLauder, a MA student in the doctorate in the Dance Movement Therapy Master's Program. Rachel.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Same Story, Different Generations, Barriers for Students in Higher Education. This is being presented by the College of Nursing and Health Professions Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My name is Rachel DeLauder and I will be serving as the moderator for the panel discussion. We welcome the purpose of bringing in this Tuesday topic of discussion. We welcome with the purpose of having this courageous conversation of current students of being engaged by graduate alumni, sharing what it took as a marginalized student to navigate the halls of CNHP to graduation. Participants will also share from current enrolled graduate students to illustrate potential overlaps in navigation strategies years later, along with current tools. This Tuesday topic is essential for current faculty, professors, staff, and students to see and hear how some history should not be repeated. We have a short period of time, so for only 1 hour. So before I introduce our panelists, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. Today's discussion is going to be recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share with your colleagues. We also invite your comments and questions in the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you like any of the questions for the speakers at any point to be asked and to be answered, they will either be posed by our speakers at the end and hold for the discussion portion at the end of the event if time permits. So let's get right into our first two panelists of current graduate students. We have Ms. Tonibelle. She is a current second-year dance movement therapy student at Drexel University. She is a cisgender, bisexual single mother of Latin American culture, and she studies clinical psychology in Guatemala since then and has worked with underserved youth and marginalized populations. She is currently studying her second year here at Drexel University, but before coming to the university, she coordinated the contemporary dance and choreography degree and developed an artistic and creative program for vulnerable youth. She is a recipient of the Fulbright Scholarship and is already planning her next project back in her home country. Please welcome Ms. Tonibelle. Next, we have Ms. Cynthia Kulambu. She is a nutrition science department PhD student and is a second-year doctoral student in the Department of Nutrition Science. She is an extensive background in maternal and child health and was a physician in Ghana with a public health background before pursuing her PhD in nutrition. She is a member of Drexel Food Lab and the Age Well Collaboratory Student Advisory Board. Please welcome Ms. Cynthia. So next we have our three panelists who will be the graduate alumni students. We have first Dr. Eram Albajri. She is an assistant professor in the clinical nutrition department at King Albajri University. She graduated with a bachelor's of science in clinical nutrition In 2012, she earned both her master's and her PhD degree in nutrition for Nutrition Science Department at Drexel University. Dr. Albajri also defended her dissertation and was chosen for the College of Nursing and Health Professions nominee for the Outstanding Dissertation Award. She was a member of the Saudi Association at Drexel University. Please welcome Dr. Eram Albajri. Next, we have Ms. Maisha White, who is a South Central Los Angeles native and a lifetime lover of dance. She is a social activist and advocate of her personal and professional spheres. She advocates for decentering white cultural values and white supremacy and incorporating Black, Indigenous, and people of color, cultural values and mental health field and society at large. Ms. Maisha graduated from Drexel University's Dance Movement Therapy and Counseling Master's Program in 2015. And Ms. Maisha is an LPC eligible therapist with clinical experience working in residential and patient community mental health and juvenile detention settings. She stays connected to Drexel by supervising dance movement therapy students as well as guest teaching in classes. She is the co-founder of Black Magic and also serves as the 2020 nominee committee chair in the American Dance Therapy Association. Please welcome Ms. Maisha. Next and lastly, we have Mr. Shane Nelson, who is a graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology with business administration minor in 2016. His involvement includes being the president of the Maui Psi chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, president of the Multicultural Greek Council, and leadership consultant in the Student Engagement Office, and worked as a project assistant for the Lindy Scholars Program and an assistant coordinator in the Center for Learning and Academic Success Services. He is a Black and Indian entrepreneur and a proud Southwestern Philadelphian. And he started the Rifey Solutions LLC in 2019 and created a year-long program known as the Diversity and Inclusion Essentials while working in higher education full-time. And he manages both Rifey Solutions LLC with his partner and co-founder, Taylor Cobbs. Please welcome Mr. Shane Nelson. So let's just get right into our first panel for discussion question. I'm going to stop sharing my slide and we'll just get right started. So can you all reflect upon your authentic experience as a disenfranchised or unrepresented student at Drexel University? I'll start right in order and ask Ms. Tonibelle.
Hi, thank you, Rachel, for this invitation. As you said, and I repeat it just because it's my identity and I have gone through a journey just to know who I am. So I am a 42-year-old cisgender, bisexual, single mother, mestiza, Latina, Centroamericana, Guatemalteca, that was able to come here to Drexel because I earned a Fulbright scholarship. And that granted me access to this higher education that usually people like me from the southern countries of the globe very seldom have access to. So the statistics that if you Google, you'll find that, yeah, in Latin America and the Caribbean, between 2000 and 2018, the percentage of growth in gross enrollment rate among the poorest in the region went from 5% till 10% in 2018. And among the wealthiest, it went from 22%, reaching 77% in 2018. So the question will be like, who is accessing higher education, right? So just in Guatemala, only 2.3% of the population is enrolled in higher education institution, and less than 1% actually have a graduate or postgraduate degree. So the 2.3% of Guatemala's population that has access to higher education equals 388,828 people, individuals, which is almost the same amount of college students just enrolled here in Philadelphia. Imagine that. Guatemala has a population of 16 million inhabitants, and I am among the less than 1% group that will have a graduate degree by the end, luckily, by the end of spring of next year. This is just to give a little bit of context, because as an international student here at Drexel, I have felt the experience of not being recognized as an international student. There has been no context. So I think context and specificity is very important, especially for international students, I guess for everyone, you know, just to be recognized by who you are, where you come from, what are your roots, so what's your identity. That I know of, I'm the only Guatemalan in CNHP. And whenever I say like, hey, I'm from Guatemala, everybody's like, oh, where's Guatemala? So I just made a little presentation just to illustrate where is Guatemala. So people tell me like, yeah, but Guatemala is like, you know, a continent, or is it, where is it? And then I just started looking that whenever you Google, you know, America or North America, here in my US phone, you have this picture. North America goes from, you know, Greenland and up to you know, down. We don't know exactly where, but just down. So I learned in school that America is this. So it's just a full continent from top to bottom, like just the whole thing. And then I learned that North America is all these countries that are in color until Mexico. So Mexico is part of North America. Then I learned that South America is this portion of the continent. And then this, you know, little space in the middle is Central America. That's where Guatemala is, you know, the purple one, it's a little one. So this is Guatemala, my home. And this is a map of the different languages that we speak in Guatemala. So there are 23 different languages. And this is the weather, the different type of weathers that we have in Guatemala. So we have, you know, blue, cold, green, it's, you know, warm, in between, you know, just eternal spring. And we have really warm weather, but people from Guatemala look like this. So we're from, you know, every color. We're very, very, very diverse. So I'll stop sharing. That's just to give a little bit sense of what is Guatemala, where do I come from? And people, you know, my peers, my teachers, the department, the CNHP, like nobody has ever asked me, like, where do you come from? How is your country like? What's the weather like? They have not asked questions. Nobody has ever become curious, except maybe for one friend probably. I have also had the experience of being othered and microaggressed, not for the first time in my life, but in a very different way. So yes, I'm bisexual and I'm single mother, so I know, and I'm a woman, so I know what microaggressions are, and I know how it feels to be othered, but I was never othered or microaggressed because, or felt being microaggressed because of my national origin or because of the color of my skin. I mean, I look as white, I pass as white, and people treat me some way when they see me, but then when they hear me speak, they're like, oh, it's different, like, it's, yeah. So I am now, for the first time in my life, a student of color, as strange as it sounds, but I am. And now more than ever, I'm also appreciative of my own culture, my origins, and my home country. So it has been an experience of cultural shock for me here at the CNHP. I have been really alone. US American culture is very individualistic. So I was hoping I was going to have, a lot of friends and meet new people, but no, it's like I'm basically alone. And yeah, that's what I have to say for this first question.
Thank you, Tonibelle. Just to reorient us, can we all each reflect upon your authentic experience as a disenfranchised or underrepresented student here at Drexel University? I'd like to hand the floor over to anyone else that would like to answer the question.
I can jump in. Am I coming in all right?
Yes.
Oh, so fantastic. So I had the rare opportunity to kind of benefit from both parents attending higher education. My mother was in the public health track for her master's and her doctorate. And so we really thought that like we knew what we were getting into for Drexel, but there was a clear difference in what undergraduate life was going to be like for, myself in comparison to what my mother experienced on campus. I specifically remember being one of the few Black students, and then you cut it even deeper, being one of the few Black males within psychology coursework. One of the things that I noticed was really interesting is that we never really talked about the intersections of race and mental health. I had to seek out sociology courses, gender and women's studies courses, to really get that other aspect of, what I wanted out of my college experience. I was really fortunate to get some guidance from Dr. Albajri when she was teaching in the Africana Studies coursework. And then I had Professor Carrington in some African American literature courses. So I had to seek outside of psychology a lot because it was so focused on like the rigorous training aspects of it to get me either primed to be a researcher or into some form of like industrial organizational psych. But again, my racial identities never really came up. We didn't really talk about that too much within like the psych field. And then being on campus as a commuter student, I was also like on the barrier of what the traditional quote unquote college experience would be. So oftentimes I kind of found space in, random classrooms that were empty. I would go to the commuter lounge from time to time, but it didn't really orient me to be close enough to like my classes. So I had to just find other spaces on campus to kind of sit and wait. And so it's pretty strange just kind of waiting in a classroom for spending, an hour and a half, 2 hours before you go home, kind of just in that place and space. And then fast forwarding towards the end of my time at Drexel, we get to the presidential election of 2016. And there was this, really palpable air of activism, but you didn't really feel inclined to, go out and protest as a Drexel student because of the nature of at least the undergraduate experience, where you're stuck in these 10-week terms and the only thing that you're really experiencing is stress. You take time to eat and then it's stress. You take time to do your final and then it's stress. And there was this, there were different points of activism that I experienced, that I saw my friends experience, but there weren't any sort of collective opportunities that the institution really said like, hey, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing. It was a very hands-off kind of approach. And it's drastically different now from what I've been seeing as an alum in the work that's going on campus. So that's been my authentic experience as an undergrad, cisgender, Black and Indian psych student. I didn't really talk about my Indian side too much because I got coded as Black and that was it. So I had a very like forced monoracial experience, even though I am multiracial. And I found a lot of my identity through outside coursework and student engagement.
Thank you, Shane. Would Dr. Eram or Ms. Maisha or Cynthia like to engage in the first question?
Yeah, I would like to add. Can you hear me about what?
Yes.
So I would kind of go with what Tonibelle said. by being lonely. So I had my master and PhD through Drexel, and I had two different experiences. So the first one was the lonely person who, even though that I had my best friend, who people judge her by her accent. So it was kind of weird because I speak English very well, but once the people hear you talking and they recognize your accent, they start to judging you and they don't listen how good you are talking. So in adding with this to the culture differences, like Tonibelle said, culture shock. So I was I lost my self-esteem during this experience, during the master. I got depressed, but thank God in the PhD, it was a totally different experience. With Dr. Bobby, the previous head department, she created like a lab group. I felt like I had a family, a culture to belong to, even though that I didn't understand all the context because the English is not my first language. So I felt like I have another family. I didn't feel judged by my accent. I didn't feel like I'm from a different country. So can very affect students. And as an international student, a Saudi, I didn't feel that I didn't find my culture. And at the same time, trying to facing all these challenges. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, there's just a bit of echo when you speak.
Okay.
Yeah, for me. But I could add something as well. I think that I've listened to everyone and well, most people, and I think that we have the same experience of loneliness and cultural shock. So, I mean, before I started the PhD program, I started in January this year. I was a full-time practicing physician, and I also worked part-time on my MPH, that's Master of Public Health degree. And so I was like in setting a bit of motion, overtime, working weekends, so like the whole thing to changing what you're used to coming to do research predominantly and doing like a PhD was the first shock. It was a good shock because now I had less things to do and more time to focus on, school. But the weather, I guess, the cold that I met in January was biting, and I struggled very much with all that. And also being alone. So now I live alone. Back home, I was living with my mom and my brother, who is also a physician. Don't ask us why we live at home when we have good jobs, but like we like to stay at home. But now I live alone. So it's like the loneliness is the first thing that gets to you. You wake up and you're alone, and the fact that the culture is different, like I've struggled to get simple stuff that you would go to like maybe a shop to get Starbucks coffee. Like I walk into Starbucks and I don't know which coffee to get. I don't know which flavor, and I don't want to hold up the queue, and I don't want to appear strange. I go to the grocery store, I want to buy something, I don't know the name of it. So usually I have to Google what I'm looking for and make sure that I get the local names, like something that you would do easily. An international student takes so much time to do, like familiarizing with the street names, not getting lost. I still don't even know how to really pick a bus, because I mean, like the whole thing, go get a SEPTA key, like it's so confusing. Like a lot of things are confusing. So for me, I guess that is the loneliness and the cultural shock is like predominantly something that, and if COVID hadn't hit, maybe by now, a lot of us, or me personally, I would have become accustomed to all this. But now with COVID, I can't get into contact with like a lot of people. I was starting to make new friends, going out, getting invited to places, but now everything is like stopped. So you are like back online. But I'm grateful for for my advisor, she is like 100% supportive. Like, she's amazing. So yeah, Dr. Malarian is amazing. And I guess with what Eram was saying earlier on, we belong to the same, lab group where we shared our experiences, we talked casually, and we were able to form a family. So that is helpful. So I guess dealing with loneliness has to do with getting connected with people, joining groups and organizations. So that is a bit of what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to this question too. When I reflected on this question, something that stood out to me was how cognizant I was of how I presented in class. I made sure that when I came to class, I used my best standard English. I wanted to make sure that my diction was appropriate. I was using proper English, which I think is a problematic statement. But using the most standard English that I could access at the time, because I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that I was smart and that I got here because I was smart and not because of affirmative action, which has a negative connotation. So I made sure I was very aware of how I spoke in class in the beginning, because I wasn't comfortable. I didn't know where people came from. Looking at the sea of white faces in my cohort total program, I think there was about close to 50 of us, about 48. And of those, there were, I think, 6 Black people, and then maybe 3 international students that were from Asian countries, and then 2 Latina women, right? So I can also count how many people of color were in the program. So I was very concerned about, and which for our program, that's pretty diverse, compared to other classes that I've seen. So I was very aware of how I spoke in class. I made sure not to slip into AVE, which is African American Vernacular English, until I got really comfortable with people. And I knew that they knew that I was smart and that I belonged there. So that was some internalized stuff that I came in with. And also so I was in school 2013 to 2015. And right in the middle of that, Mike Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson. And so that amped up the conversations that we had in our multicultural diversity class, and things started to happen. But I remember being very specific in times in which I spoke up in my multicultural diversity class, because I didn't want to be perceived as an angry Black woman. There's a lot of things that I felt that were problematic, that were microaggressive / overtly aggressive. But I was very cognizant and specific about when I spoke up, because I didn't want to speak up on everything, because I didn't want to get the label of the angry Black person in class. And so it was a lot of code switching and trying to figure out where I am, where I fit, what people think about me. And that was straddling that line constantly of how do I show up, how do I present, how do I be authentic to myself, and let people know that I belong here. So that was something that was a constant thread. And I'm thankful that I had 4 other, Black women with me in class, because, if I'm being honest, we would have times where we would stay after class and be like, can you believe these white people said this? Or this was said in class. And we had to have that Black girl time. And I don't know what I would have done, had I not had the connection with other Black students. And I had good connection with my non-Black cohort, but having that core of Black women with me was super important.
Thank you. I believe we could all attest to that. Can you guys hear me okay? For the second question, can you reflect and just touch upon one committee or a social group that you were a part of during your time and student experience that helped support you during your time here at Drexel University?
Okay, I'll jump in. Oh, you can go, I'm sorry.
No, you can go. During my master, it was really difficult to adjust since I came from a semester system to a quarter system, which is very quick. So during that time, I didn't have any group, or I was trying to join the journal clubs, but it was really hard. But during the master, the club that helped the most was the Dr. Bobby lab group, because as I said, we talked about things, what we felt, with no judgment at all. I also joined Saudi Union, Student Union, which is kind of helpful because I'm talking to people who understand me because they came from the same culture. They experienced exactly the same thing. So it's kind of, I had the both advantages with Dr. Bobby, people who are from the same field, at the same time, people who are come from the same culture. So this was really helpful.
Thank you. Tonibelle like to answer the question?
Yeah. Cats of color. So one friend, one classmate from the art therapy cohort, just like had this push, this drive. She has this drive, like, of organizing and calling up people. And we have already had these external conversations, like, can you believe what happened in class? Can you believe this? So it kind of started getting organized, and now we're like an association, a formal association, Drexel Student Association, and we're like working a lot. Yeah, we have this space to vent and to debrief, but also it's very challenging because, well, we're not only debriefing, we're like trying to work out things, like, and Rachel is also part of the group, so she knows. And yeah, also I'm also part of the board of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So this is like a very strong platform where you can, start, planning and dreaming big and, projecting yourself. So yeah, cats of color, my heart.
Thank you.
Actually, we had, towards the end of my second year in the DMT program, Dr. Marisol Norris, we had a small group of cats of color towards the end of that. I don't know, how that continued. I felt, though, when I was there, it was really hard being disconnected from main campus. So being at Hahnemann, like, super far from main campus. Also, we weren't connected with the affinity groups in our professional association, so I didn't even learn about those, or I didn't really have any conversation with those people until towards the end of my first year, going into second year. And second year in the creative arts therapy program is internship, classes, and thesis. So it's, I'm just going and trying to graduate at this point. So luckily I had a nice cohort within my class, but it was really hard to connect. I don't think the professors and the administrators in our program made any intentional strides to get us connected outside of school. And I think that would have been nice and been helpful. So, like, even Drexel Black Grad Student Union, I didn't know about that until my second year. And at that point it was January and I'm just looking for June to get here.
Yeah. How about Ms. Cynthia, Mr. Shane?
I can jump in. So the one organization that I think really cemented my identity as a Black man and as an Indian man, as a leader in some whatever space, like whether it was on campus or in the community, was my fraternity. So for those who aren't familiar, Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated started, it'll be 114 years ago on Friday. It's the first Black Greek letter organization of its kind. But with that, we have a lot of, just things that come with fraternity life. So we're talking about heteropatriarchy. We're talking about all of the things that come with unhealthy masculinities. We're talking about all of these things in which we want to do empowerment, but then it just ends up being a lot of straight Black guys like taking the mic. And so when I had the opportunity to lead the chapter, I was given a lot of freedom for the citywide chapter, which at the time covered work at Villanova University, the University of Pennsylvania, and St. Joseph's University. That's where we were trying to get most of our activation going, along with Drexel. And we did programs on LGBTQ plus issues where the center on campus provided the speaker and the facilitator. We figured out ways to get women's empowerment programming right. We found a way to register an entire senior class at Overbrook High School to vote and really get out there to like do civic engagement. And it taught me about like how to use a platform for good. But it also taught me like a lot of the gaps within the institution to support marginalized student organizations. So oftentimes we were a part of, funding conversations, and we had no institutional knowledge of how to get funding as a student org. I didn't know that there was a pot of money that I could use to, pay my dues or set these things up. It was a piece where, you go into the office or specifically for Greek life, and the staff members, they meant incredibly well, but there wasn't that cultural connection or that like lived experience that came compared to the experience I had at Villanova, to the experience that I had at Penn, and even the experience I had at St. Joe's. Like Drexel, for some reason, just didn't quite click. And then when you think about just all of the, racial injustice, specifically Black violence that occurred like in that time period between 2012 and 2016, like it became a very rare echo chamber, but also a very rare space to like create change and to create impact. And so it set the foundation for a lot of the social justice and diversity, equity, inclusion education that I do through my firm. And I wanted to kind of highlight that because it's been a real impactful experience to kind of do that, but also to understand the institutional barriers that exist when you don't teach your students about how to get funding, how to actually run an organization, how to properly onboard people, how to have those difficult conversations, or how to use your organizational platform to resist against bias. Because the standard Greek life media portrayal is one mired in so many problematic things. And unfortunately, cultural Greek life isn't as celebrated because we're put into the fun box of just stepping and strolling, and we're much more than that.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Cynthia, would you like to share?
Yeah, so for me, when I started the program, I was looking for a group or groups to engage myself in. And I got introduced to the Philadelphia Community Action Network. There's a small group within that. I think it's the Integrated Care Network that looks at maternal health and reducing infant mortality. And I was invited by a nice lady called Samantha Shuster after I was trying to sort of recruit through her organization for a study. And I think that I have learned a lot by being part of the CAN, because I realized that there are health disparities, and that, maternal deaths, infant mortality, preterm births and stuff, that affects, people of color, especially African-American women. And so it's opened my eyes to things that maybe I didn't pay too much attention to before. I mean, like initially I'm focused on, Africa has high mortality rates. But then I come to the US and then I realize that, it's high here, but it's disproportionately high, especially in Philly. So I get to like learn what the problem is and the action that is sort of being taken to address it. So I sort of joined groups based on my interest. And then I'm also part of Drexel Food Lab. And that is also, we've worked on a couple of projects, and that's also an amazing group of people that I currently work with. And recently I was also invited to join the Age Well Student Collaboratory, and that's also another amazing group, and also an opportunity for me to learn more about aging health. And so, yeah, for me, I pick sort of my groups based on my interests. And I hope that I can be more involved in groups that sort of look at representation, and because I mean, it's hard being Black and African, but not fully understanding the African American experience. Like, people look at you and they expect that. They think you're Black, so you should understand, but you have not sort of lived it, so you don't really know how to fully understand. So you are in the process of learning, and I cannot speak or say that I do fully understand. I'm trying my best to understand. So that is my experience, I guess.
Thank you all. As we getting closer to the end of our time together, I just want to jump into the third and fourth last question and just orient us into here in College of Nursing and College of Nursing professions at Drexel University. We acknowledge past and ongoing injustices in society at large and are committed to reflection and dialogue and action to address our role in perpetuating these injustices and formulating strategies to prevent them. So as past and current students, I would also like to ask, as past and current professionals in your various fields, if you had your druthers, how can academic institutions better support underrepresented minority students? I would like to hand the floor first to Tonibelle, and then we could just go from there.
Yeah, I have been thinking about this along with cats of color, like, constantly. And there's this thing that we have been talking about and feeling that the content that we're being taught is like very white, taught by white teachers, directed to white counselors that will be working with marginalized populations. So my own identity as a Latina doesn't play a role, doesn't have a piece into it. So I had to figure it out on my own, like, what is it going to look like for me being, a dance movement therapist back in Guatemala? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I have to figure it out by myself. So in that sense, I guess that definitely there has to be a contract of diverse faculty that has experience, like concrete experience with marginalized populations. The update of the curriculum has to be, done. It has to be pertinent to marginalized students as well that will be working with oppression as trauma, because it's like the common ground, for underserved and marginalized populations. Also, I would suggest, that teachers always say, like, I don't possess, the ultimate knowledge. But this is just a thing that comes out of their mouth, and probably they have this intention, but they never stop to ask, like, hey, I know that you're not from around here, so how does things work out, or how do you see this or that, phenomena going on back in your country? So I would like say that if Drexel is accepting international students into its classrooms, the curricula has to be informed by, international contexts as well. Then lastly, I would say that white teachers have to develop the ability and sensitivity to facilitate difficult conversations in their classrooms. Classrooms are society's microcosms, and if a student gathers the courage to speak up and call forward a teacher for, say, a microaggression, the teacher has to be informed as to how to properly react and navigate that experience. I think it's in the classrooms, relating dynamics where multicultural competence will be taught. I guess that multicultural competence and multicultural sensitivity are not cognitive constructs that can theoretically be taught, like by a book. They are embodied attitudes that have to operate in classroom relational dynamics.
Thank you. Ms. Maisha?
I would like for Drexel as an organization and each college and programs in the organization to have intensive anti-racism training, and not anti-bias, because that's a wash and it's this very friendly term. We need anti-racism training, specifically, and one that addresses specifically anti-Black racism, because it's different, and a lot of other racism stems from anti-Blackness, in terms of how people assimilate and what people want to assimilate to. But that covers the white values that are present in higher education, in the medical model, in psychology, right? We need to do that anti-racism training to figure out where these cultural values come from and how this doesn't apply to mostly non-white people. And also that I think that will guide how we invite other cultures, right? Non-white people, non-white cultures into, do we want them, we bring them to our school, into our programs, right? But do we really value their diversity, or do you want them to assimilate to the way that we do things? I think that cannot happen if there's not widespread anti-racism training, learning white culture, what that is for white people, because people of color who have to navigate these systems, we know it, right? So white teachers, white organizations, defining what white culture is and undoing and unlearning those things so that we can really diversify, and so people's cultures can be brought in, and not just having people of color assimilate to these white structures. I would also like, and I can speak specifically from my program that I went through, I think there needs to be a concerted effort to recruit people of color, Black people, Asian people, Latinx people, non-cis, non-hetero people, recruit them to be professors, because representation matters and you come with a different cultural perspective. And if that is not possible, it's always possible. It might take a little more work, but it's always possible. But having a concerted effort to connect people with communities they might identify with. There are always groups. That was something that I really felt was missing. I felt like, being a Black dance movement therapist, I should have been automatically connected with the Black dance movement therapy group in the ADTA. I don't, that should be automatic, right? Or having these resources available. These people need to be involved in the orientation process from the very beginning. And people can choose who they want to identify with, who they want to connect with, but I think there needs to be systemic and organizational intentionality in connecting people and actually diversifying and unlearning whiteness.
Thank you. Miss Dr. Eram?
I totally agree with both of them, and they suggested a great suggestion. So the first thing I want to say that they should do some studies about the challenges for each student from different culture. So they start from the base, understand them. So at least to provide strategies for those students how to cope with whatever challenges they are facing. And also, if they accepted international students, they should be aware that there are a lot of challenges with those students, and they should be sensitive with them. They're not American, their language is not English. So why do you judge them if you accepted them? So it's really a hard thing to do. So accepting meaning that I'm welcoming you, but at the same time, not fully supporting you. So.
Thank you. Miss Cynthia?
I agree with everyone, and especially what Tonibelle said about lectures and classrooms, being a comfortable place to talk about issues of race and stuff like that. And I am so grateful for a class I'm taking this quarter with Dr. Rich on health disparities. I think that he creates this extra time within the week where you can meet with him and talk about things that you may not be able to get across in the classroom. And he makes that extra time to sort of listen. And that's even outside office hours. So I think that it's something that could be considered. I have been lucky to have lecturers and professors who have taken time to ask me how I'm doing on multiple occasions. Where are you living? How is it going? And stuff like that. So I think that little things like this make underrepresented students feel welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Shane?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this one. As someone who researches institutions of higher education, I picked up my master's in higher ed last year, and my firm, we really specialize in working with colleges and universities. So one, I wanted to shout out my co-panelists because y'all covered like a good multitude of the dimensions. I think the only pieces that I could add would be making policies transparent and accessible for students. One of the kind of tools that we provide institutions is like a website audit. And I can't tell y'all how many times that like websites are the thing that provide or sell that university, right? It's the digital real estate. And so if we know that white institutional presence exists in the form of different statues and names of buildings, right? How does that manifest in the digital landscape? How does that manifest in your digital real estate? Because so many students are going to interface with that. You know, are the pages that are super important for the student experience able to be translated into multiple languages? Are they, you know, requiring additional institutional knowledge? Terry also created the community cultural wealth model. And it's a model that comes from higher education research. And it talks about how like so many different versions of culture like have capital, whether it's linguistic, resistant, navigational, you name it. And so by designing websites or by, you know, having academic institutions kind of privilege this sort of traditional student who came from a legacy background, who has, you know, an upper, like middle to upper class standing, and they already know how to navigate the site. When you build that tool for a student to pick coursework, right, you're not accounting for the international student. You're not accounting for that student who has had experience with higher education, maybe, but they don't know what classes to pick. There's no walkthrough video. There's nothing that helps aid in the consumption of the material. So I would want to see academic institutions do more of that. The only other piece that I would add would be around the elements of customer support. So if we understand all things being what they are, we're in this anti-Black global capitalist system, we understand that higher education institutions are, you know, businesses. So if we as students are consumers of some sort of product that they're selling, we need to ensure that there is a level of customer service excellence brought to the work. So we should be able to navigate spaces and have our needs met in some specific way, because we're buying luxury products. We are buying into these degrees that are, you know, thousands of dollars. They put us hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And so we need to find ways to have academic institutions really mirror the experiences of these top luxury brands, where they're, you know, accounting for every need before you anticipate it. They have everything accessible in your language. They understand and take the time to train themselves on anti-racist training, on, you know, cultural competency training, and all of these different pieces, because they want you to be there, right? They want you to indulge in these products. And we're at a very interesting time where the model of higher education has been drastically disrupted. The brick and mortar approach that is so valued in traditionalist, idealist and elitist lenses is being incredibly challenged. And so how are you making it worth it? How are you setting that up? And so I really want to see that piece as well.
Thank you. As we come to an end, I would just like to have like a share of highlights from the panel that we just discussed. We discussed that we would like to, as a summary, to encourage a safe space. We will also discuss that we will also like to honor various perspectives, systemic oppression, dismantle systemic oppression, civic engagement, and we had courageous multi-generational conversations. And we also talked about social injustice of multi-perspectives. I would like to have a special thanks to you all. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you again to all for coming, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Nice meeting you.
Mhm.
I wanted to be able to jump on as well. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. I was wondering where everybody went all of a sudden. But I just wanted to be able to jump on as well, because I mean, this conversation was just absolutely powerful. It was, I learned a lot, from your individual perspectives coming from such an eclectic voice, right? So I was able to kind of follow that. If you were looking into the chat, I placed a summary of your first responses. And then of course you're getting a little bit ahead of me, so I couldn't type that fast. But I guarantee that this recording is going to reach the dean's space, because Darren's going to make sure that I get the link directly, and I'm going to make sure that I send it directly to Dean Gitlin. I took what I will call nothing less than copious notes. I had to end up changing colors because I wanted to make sure things that I wanted to highlight. But some of the things that really struck with me are, I wrote in, we need to do better. And that's not even a sellout point. I mean, we just need to do better. And by better, when Rachel thought to ask that question of you, I'm like, oh, great. I just wrote in the chat, we need to do better. And here comes the better question. So great, Rachel. So I'm writing down about, of course, Tonibelle, you mentioned about it being we are at a PWI. We are at a predominantly white institution. And I don't think anyone's having a revelation that when you come to a PWI, most people are white. And again, I like what Dr. Eram said in terms of when she said, if you're going to allow me to be here, don't judge me while I'm here. That was deep, right? And the feeling of that, right, Manisha, that was really deep. And the feeling that comes from that kind of experience, it just reeks, it settles around my heart, right? So that means it's enveloping it, right? And it's not pumping the way it was before this session. You guys mentioned about, you have to figure it out for yourself. I think that was when Cynthia, did we lose Cynthia? I think Cynthia was sharing about, how she has to navigate all of this alone. And that's something that's really gonna quickly change. We have a global healthcare within CNHP now. We have a board just about global healthcare, and I can guarantee you that this message is going to make it back to that global board. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Veronica Carey. I'm the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at CNHP. And I'm also the chair of the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So the fact that we can have your powerful voices and have a stage for it at CNHP is historical. This never transpired before. Why? Because it was a predominantly Caucasian female experience. And so to be able to have this stance, this platform, and Darren's brainchild of the Tuesday topics, and for us to be able to have 2nd and 10th week of each quarter, if not more. But we are touching on spaces that need to be talked about. So your authentic voices were appreciated today. I like how you didn't hold back. Things that were hurtful for you, people shared. And I know that couldn't have been easy, but it was necessary. And Darren knows, and Rachel knows, and those of you that are on from Marcia, I see here, and I see Emily on here, and Carly, and Megan, and Lindsay, and Michelle, and Shell. These are all board members that are just lauding Rachel DeLauder, because of the phenomenal panel that she assembled here. And I'm sorry if Dr. Eram and Cynthia aren't hearing me. I'll make it a point to share it with them as well. But like I said, I literally wrote down, I think it was Manisha, you mentioned about the anti-racism training, the anti-Blackness. Yes, absolutely. Sitting with other Blacks when class is over. Can you believe that they said that? Yes, that needs to happen, because you got to brush those bricks off your shoulder. You can't keep them there, or you're going to be walking around like this, and then, you've got to get our shoulders down. So I just applaud for Rachel, for you having this. I know this is your brainchild. It took some massaging to get it to where you wanted it to be. And then you picked the best persons to share. So thank you all for being a part of today's presentation.
Thank you.